I swear to God. Where's my shit? Watch. I think I know how to do it.
Hello.
I'm gonna learn.
Hello.
You booked a cozy Verbo mountain cabin with a kitchen where everyone can chef. But the thing they'll
Michelle's first connection drops one lie.
There's been a whole bunch of talk today
That shakes her to the core.
Good evening, everyone. We will get started. Wait a minute, am I on mute? No, I'm not. We will get started soon. We're going to wait for some more people to log on. For those of you who have never met me, my name is Dr. Kimberly Martin, and I am the new DEI coordinator for Royal Oak Schools. I want to welcome you to the First Parent University. We're excited to have you. A lot of folks have signed up this evening, so we're just going to give them about 5 more minutes to come on, and then I will introduce our wonderful speaker, Dr. Jay Marks. Okay, everyone, hello again. We're just going to wait a couple more minutes. We've had a lot of people sign up today, we want to give them the chance to come on in. So give us a minute and Dr. J. Marks will begin. Oh, okay.
Give me 60 seconds and I'll be ready to go.
I am here. Oh, what did I do? Okay. I'm here. Now Jay went away. Oh, he said 60 seconds. So we have 60 seconds in that time. I will reintroduce myself to those of you who may not have known me yet or met me yet. My name is Dr. Kimberly Martin. I am the new DEI coordinator for Royal Oak Schools. I'd like to welcome you to our very first session of Parent University. We are excited to bring this series to you as parents and guardians and caretakers of your children to keep you involved in your your children's education and just on top of current issues. Our speaker tonight is the wonderful Dr. J. Marks from Oakland School District. I'll let him tell you all about himself because he likes to do that, but he is a wonderful presenter and we thank him for this evening. So I'm going to turn it over to him and he will direct you in terms of putting things in the chat, all that kind of good stuff. So take it away, Dr. Marks.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Good evening, my Royal Oak family. Good to be in community with you. I want to thank Dr. Martin, Mary Beth Fitzpatrick, and the Royal Oak leadership team and community, and for you for inviting me to your community this evening and allowing me to facilitate this conversation. Inside of the chat, I put in a link to an agenda, it's an interactive agenda, because this will not be the J. Mark show for an hour and a half. This will be us working collectively and collaboratively engaging with one another, okay? So grab that agenda. And inside the agenda are linked some activities as well as videos and tons of resources that we'll use to facilitate our learning together in this conversation this evening. But as a way to get started and build a little community together, I'm gonna ask everyone to go to the chat and put your name and what's one thing that you do as a parent to teach your child about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. What's one thing you do as a parent to teach your child or children about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice? Put that in the chat for me, please. Oh, thank you, Troy. Been reading a lot of books with his first grader about diversity and other cultures, and books that aren't necessarily about diversity, but just have main characters of different cultures and abilities. Oh, excellent, Troy. Great suggestion. Who else do we have? Kim. What's up, Kim? People the way you want to treat people the way you want to be treated. I love it. Ryan, read books, watch movies, have conversation. Yes. See, I knew I was in the right place this evening, Dr. Martin. Our family in Royal Oak, they doing stuff already. Erica reminds her son, oh, let me see, so much reminds son how important it is to have friends who look different than him. Yes, and learn and celebrate about differences. Yes, Claudine, I talk about current events with our kids. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Who else do we have? Val, our household is biracial, so we talk all the time. often about current events, sometimes about situations we experience. Yes, Megan, talk about what is going on in the news regarding these issues. I love it. Discussing current events, says Suzette. I'm gonna read a couple more. I love building community. So this is one of my favorite parts of the presentation. Emily says, when issues come up at school, in the news, or on TV, we talk about it. Amen, Emily. And Dana Williams says, we discuss the community where we live, the diversity within it, within the school. We also discuss current events, life experience, and to respect everyone. I love it. I'm gonna ask you all to continue to come in, introduce yourselves, and share that one thing that you do with your children to teach them about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. That's important, right? Because I hope, it is my hope, my goal, that we take some things away from this conversation. But I also know that there's some rich things that you're already doing in your practices as parents. And I wanted you to have an opportunity to share those things this evening. Excuse me. Again, welcome to Let's Talk, conversations with children about race, racism, and anti-racism. My name is Jay Marks. I'm a diversity and equity consultant with Oakland Schools, which is the intermediate school district in Oakland County. I am a practitioner. I'm an educator. This is my 31st year in our beloved profession of education. I was a high school teacher for 17 years, teaching students with IEPs, both in Detroit public schools and Southfield public schools. These are the loves of my life. My daughters, Amari and Jalea. Amari is the oldest. She's to your right, the shorter of the two. Yeah, she's the oldest is the shortest one. Sometimes that happens, right? But Amari, my oldest, she's 18 years old. She's a freshman now at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And Jalea, the baby, the taller one to your left, she's 15 years old. She's a sophomore, and she attends West Bloomfield High School. And I am a proud papa, as you can see. My girls are scholar athletes. They do very well academically, and they also compete in track and field. Well, they did. The oldest, she decided not to run in college. She just wanted to focus on academics and living her best life. And so I thought that was, I agreed with her. But family, it's important that you know this about me, that I don't go anywhere to talk to anybody about anything without introducing my girls, because I feel so richly blessed of all the people in the world that God could have chosen to be their father. God chose me. Little old Jay Marks from the Northwest side of Detroit. He trusted me with that. And I'm honored and humbled to be their father. I want to say happy LGBTQ plus History Month. October is a time that's been designated in our country where we acknowledge, celebrate, and affirm the valuable contributions that members of the LGBTQ plus have made to the history of this country, right? And I look at it twofold. I look at it as an opportunity to acknowledge, celebrate, and affirm these contributions, right? And members of the LGBTQ plus community. But I also look at it as an opportunity to deepen our understanding and our knowledge and our own awareness about these contributions so that we could be more intentional and explicit about how we tell the story about the history of this country. Because we have a history of exclusion in this country. We have a history of not positively acknowledging and affirming the valuable contributions that all Americans have made. So as a result, we have all of these history months and the sort, and various heritage months and the sort. And I think they're important that we celebrate those heritage months until we get to a point of full inclusion. And it's my humble opinion, we're not there yet. So I like to take advantage of these opportunities to encourage us all to celebrate, acknowledge, and affirm, but also deepen our learning and understanding so that we can be more inclusive, right, after October and not forget about what we celebrated during October, if that makes sense, okay? So happy LGBTQ plus History Month to all of you. Couple of working agreements. It is my goal. There are 50 of us on this, in this venue together this evening. It is my goal that it is interactive. So I am hoping that you guys are with me. I see a lot of cameras are off, but I'm hoping that you're with me because I won't be talking the entire time. I'll be talking, then I'll be putting you in breakout rooms and asking you to talk with each other and asking you all to engage and interact with me. Just a few reminders. One, to stay muted unless you're speaking. Of course, then I'll be inviting you to speak. When you do, just raise, when you want to speak, just raise your hand and Dr. Martin will unmute you and give you an opportunity to speak, okay? So we'll use that protocol when you want to share. We are recording the session, so it'll be available, I imagine, for future use for folks to see, those who are not able to attend this evening. I would love to see your wonderful faces. So if you're able to turn your cameras on, that helps me with our level of engagement because we're already distant because we're doing this remotely. So because we're doing it remotely, I'm not connected to you now anyway. But if you could turn your cameras on, that just helps me with connecting with you, okay? And building a sense of community with everyone. Again, the chat will be a place where you can put questions, but also I'll be asking you to go to the chat and put your thoughts and reflections there, because this is designed to be an interactive session, okay? And then other than that, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, okay? Enjoy the ride. So I'm gonna set a context for this conversation this evening. And so I have goals because you have expectations. And so I want my goals to meet your expectations. But I like to sometimes start off talking about what I won't do first, right? And what this will not be. So this will not be something where I'm trying to provide you with a script for how to talk to your children about race and racism, right? The work doesn't come that way. If it was that easy or that simple, I'd have written that script in a book somewhere, published it, you would have bought it, and then I'd be getting ready to watch Monday Night Football, and you'd be cooking dinner for your families, right? So the work doesn't come that way, unfortunately. Another thing I would not do is blame, shame, or guilt anyone because of your racial identity or racial consciousness, right? Blame, shame, and guilt are normal emotions that come with this work, right? And you may find yourself feeling those emotions. And what I would encourage you to do, if you do feel those emotions, allow yourself to sit in that space. Allow yourself, give yourself permission to sit in those emotions, right? And ask yourself, why am I feeling this way about this particular topic, right? Do some self-reflection. And then lastly, I would not attempt to tell you what you should do as a parent, but rather offer approaches to consider, right? As a friend, colleague, and brother of mine, Calvin Terrell, who does this work nationally, lives in Arizona. Calvin says, I won't should on you, and I ask that you don't should on me. So we shouldn't be shoulding on each other, right? We all got work to do. So I'm not gonna tell you what you should be doing as a parent. I'm just gonna offer up some things and you take it for what it's worth. And hopefully there's some application to you in your life and with your family, and particularly with your children, okay? So what I'm going to do, I'm gonna ask you to focus and reflect on your own racial identity. I'm gonna ask you to do that. I'm gonna ask you to focus on the role you may play in perpetuating racism as a result of your racial consciousness. I'm gonna ask you to consider that. I'm gonna challenge you to think about deeper issues relative to race, racism, and anti-racism. And then finally, again, I'm gonna introduce you to some ideas to consider when talking to your own children about issues of race and racism. And then I'm gonna, these are called community agreements, but these are also rights and responsibilities, because we all have rights to be members of this community. But I also believe that we hold responsibility towards each other, members of this community. Oh, look at that baby. Oh, Miss Hill, thank you for sharing that baby with us. And look at that old handsome baby too. Look at that family. I love it. Yes, we do shout outs. I do shout outs. So you put a beautiful baby on the screen, I'm gonna definitely give you a shout out. But we all have a right and responsibilities as members of this community. And I wanna share these 4 things that I'm gonna ask us humbly to do this evening as we engage in this topic together. I'm gonna ask first that we listen fully with our ears and hearts to seek to understand before seeking to be understood. I find for me in this work that I know that I have ears to hear and listen, but when I listen with my heart, it allows 2 things to happen for me. It allows me to listen with empathy, and it allows me to connect my humanity to the humanity of the people or person whom I'm having a conversation with. So I ask that we listen with our ears and hearts. I ask that we stay focused and take responsibility for our own learning, right? You own what you learn, and you own if you learn this evening, but to take responsibility for that for yourself. I ask when you speak, and I will be asking you to speak, but that you speak from your own experiences using I statements instead of generalizing. And finally, I ask that we all commit to doing something in our practice as parents different as a result of what we learn together. And I know that you're an amazing parent. You're already doing wonderful, beautiful, amazing things, rich, edifying things with your children. But what will you add to your parenting as a result of what we do together this evening? And again, this conversation is not about blame, shame, or guilt, but those are normal emotions that you may find yourself experiencing as we engage in these conversations. All right, I'm gonna start off with a video. And this video comes from a Procter & Gamble commercial. Actually, you may have seen it. It's called The Talk. The Talk is very common in communities of color. They're framed around conversations that Black and Brown and Indigenous parents find themselves having to have with their children, not because they want to, but for survival. So we're going to take a look at this, and I'm going to ask you to go to the chat after the video and put your thoughts and reflections in the chat based off of what you observed from the video, okay? Let's check it out. It's called The Talk.
Who said that?
The lady at the store.
That is not a compliment.
Listen, it's an ugly, nasty word, and you are gonna hear it. Nothing I can do about that. But you are not gonna let that word hurt you. You hear me?
There are some people who think you don't deserve the same privileges just because of what you look like. It's not fair. It's not.
Remember, you can do anything they can. The difference is you gotta work twice as hard and be twice as smart.
Come straight home after practice. You got your ID? Guess I stopped you.
How's your review?
We're good.
You good?
Yeah,
You see?
we're good.
Okay.
Good.
Now, when you get pulled over,
I'm a good driver.
baby,
Don't worry.
this is not about you getting a ticket. This is about you not coming home.
I'm gonna be okay. Right? Okay.
It's not fair. But you keep showing up.
You are not pretty for a Black girl. You are beautiful, period. Okay? Don't ever forget that.
All right, family, I'm going to ask you to go to the chat for me. In the chat, what's resonating with you from this video? Is this something familiar to you? Is there connections that you're making? Was this something new? Is it extending your thinking in any way? What's resonating with you? What are your thoughts about the video? Put that in the chat for me, please. Powerful reflections, powerful reflections. Yeah, sad but necessary conversations. Yeah, I see some connections. People have had these conversations themselves as children. emotional. Is there one person who would not mind or who would like to unmute yourself and just share your reflection with the group? I'll take one volunteer. If you'd like to, just raise your hand using the icon that you have or the emoji, and Dr. Martin would unmute you.
Yeah, they might be able to unmute themselves. If you go under reactions, they can raise their hand, but I'm gonna wait and see if they can unmute themselves. There's, okay, Dana Williams. Can you unmute yourself, Dana?
Thank you,
Hi.
Dana. Hello.
Hi.
Hi. So I with everything that happened over the last year, I've had to, or 2 years, had to have conversations with my now 10-year-old about, you know, things happen in the world, because he's very aware. My 6-year-old is too, but he's still, you know, he's still little yet. Keep things age appropriate, but my 10-year-old has an interest in news. And so just with all that said, had to explain to him why a brown boy, a Black boy, why he may be treated different in certain situations, and that he has friends, you know, that are not Black. You know, he has a friend, like one of his best friends that's white, and, you know, they get along well, and they are how children should be with each other. So I try to inform him, but not scare him. And I say that's the part that's really hard to understand, that as we are now in this world, that there are differences, and that he may not encounter some of that. I wish I could say that he would never encounter any traumatic events, you know, surrounding his race, whether it be just anything, but I know that's not a reality. I won't be able to protect him always. So we've had discussions about, like, if he is, for instance, I'll just say, is stopped by like a police officer, like certain things that he should or should not do. So we've had those conversations. And the thing is, he's in a karate class with Wayne County sheriffs. Like, everybody in there are officers. We have officers that we know. I have a friend was a Detroit police officer at FBI. So it's not like we don't know officers and we tell them that officers are bad, but just to be aware that there are certain things that he can and cannot do, and that he needs to just follow whatever protocol it is, you know. So we've had to have that conversation, and it's hard because you don't want to scare them because they're so young. But at the same time, it's necessary. So
Dana, thank you for sharing. No, thank you for allowing us into the intimacy of your home, right? And such a personal experience and conversation that you have with your children. So thank you for the courage and vulnerability you showed in sharing that with us. And again, a lot of comments in the chat, and I just wanted to give someone an opportunity to give a voice to, you know, your thoughts and experiences. And it sounds like Ms. Williams has a connection, a very personal connection to these conversations and having the talk with her children. I'm going to ask you to go to the agenda. And if you're just joining us, didn't get it, I'm putting it back in the chat. I want you to go to the agenda. I want you to click on the link that says assess your comfort level. So we're here to talk about how to have conversations about race, racism, and anti-racism with your children. When I facilitate these type of sessions with educators and other folks who are interested in having these conversations, one of the first things we talk about is one's comfort level in having these conversations, because you can't have a conversation about something without assessing how comfortable are you talking about it, right? How can you talk about it? And that becomes the impediment for some of us in the first place of having these conversations, is the discomfort we experience. We have not fully assessed our own comfort level in engaging these conversations. So once you click on that, you have to make a copy. Once you make a copy, it's yours. So make a copy so that it's yours. And then you can write directly in that document. So the first thing I'm going to ask you to do is go to the top of the document, and you'll see these 6 questions or these 6 prompts. I want you to consider the following statements. And I want you to select the one that best describes how you feel when it comes to talking about race and racism. And I want you to think about how you feel, particularly having these conversations with your own children, because that's what the focus of this presentation is this evening, having these conversations with our children. So I would rather not talk about race or racism, or I am very uncomfortable talking about race or racism, or I am usually uncomfortable talking about race or racism, or I am sometimes uncomfortable talking about race or racism, or I am usually comfortable talking about race or racism, or I am very comfortable. I want you to go and just select one of them. You can highlight it, bold it, underline it, but I want you to just select one in the document, okay? You're not putting this in the chat. You're interacting with this document. And not on the screen. No, you're going to go to your own. You're going to go to your own document. That's in the you're going to go to your own document that's in the chat. That's linked into the agenda. All right. You should be able to grab your own document from the agenda where it says assess your comfort level. And then you can interact with that document that's yours. Okay, so that we all don't see your responses.
Just to reiterate, Jay has put the link in the chat. If you click on that link, it will take you to the document. It'll prompt you to make a copy, which you should do. And then at that point is your document. So we can't see your responses or anything. This is something for you and not to be necessarily shared unless you want to.
Right. Yeah, we don't want you telling all your business, not right now. Once you've done that, so you have these 6 statements, right? And again, if you haven't done it yet, you still have them in front of you, and they're at the top of the document that's linked into your agenda. At the bottom of the agenda, you'll notice 4 questions. I'm going to ask you to reflect on your comfort level. So I want you to think about what you indicated was your comfort level to the left. And then I want you to respond to just one of these questions below. The hard part of talking about race or racism is, or the beneficial part of talking about race or racism is, or my own experience of race taught me, or other people's experience of race may be different from mine because. I want you to take 2 minutes and respond to just one of these questions. And again, you can write directly into the document that's linked into your agenda that says assess your comfort level. Take 2 minutes and write a response to just one of these 4. And then I'm going to put you in breakout rooms for a sharing opportunity. And Dr. Kim, I don't see the breakout room icon.
Where is it usually?
Where it says more, you go to more.
Okay. Where's more? I don't have more, do I?
You click on that.
Where's more?
Well, you may not have it because.
All right, you're the host now. Do you want to switch it back to me?
Let me switch it back to you. And if you're able, let's see if you're able to get the breakout room.
Okay. Let me know when I'm the host.
You're the host.
Okay, here we go. Now, you know what, Jay? I don't seem to have it. I'm not sure what's going on. Oh, man, is this going to mess us up?
Nope, not at all. We move forward. Not
That's
at
right.
all. Take another 28 seconds if you're writing a response, and this reflection is for you.
I apologize.
Don't apologize, it's all
I
good.
thought I had everything all together, but now we're just gonna have to share amongst each other.
That's all right. Yeah.
Thank you for everyone for your patience and understanding. And let me
All
know
right.
when you want to be host again, Jay.
Yep, you can make me host,
Okay,
and I'll just take it from here.
all right.
All right. Is there anyone who would like to share? And I'll take up to 3 volunteers. I'm not going to ask you your comfort level. That's personal, but I will ask you to share your reflection to the prompt. What prompt did you choose and what did you write? And I'll take up to 3 volunteers.
You can just raise your hand and unmute yourself, just like Miss Williams did before.
Can I speak?
You sure can speak. Thank
Sorry,
you.
I'm having difficulties. So,
It's all good.
so did I have to choose 2 questions or
Just one.
just one reflection? I think the hardest part for me to talk about racism, and I do talk about racism because I am from Spain, so I'm Spanish or Hispanic, or I don't know yet where I feel into the category Latino, Hispanic. I feel uncomfortable sometimes because I feel like I don't know the right words. And when I talk to my children, I don't want by using the wrong words even to make things worse. So that's my biggest thing talking about racism. Otherwise, I feel very comfortable, but just making sure I use the right words so I don't perpetuate racism. That's my biggest challenge.
And is it Raquel? Is it Raquel?
It's Raquel.
Raquel, thank you, Raquel. Thank you. And that's a real fear, right?
Yes.
Making sure the terminology right.
Mhm.
Making sure we're using common language and language that is appropriate for the conversations. So yeah, and real cause for fear. Cassandra, what's up, Cassandra?
Hello, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Super, thanks for asking. So I wanted to say, I think the hardest part about talking about racism to me is that I feel like I am defending my right to exist. And I feel like sometimes it is, and especially when I'm talking to my children, I feel like I'm telling them it's okay for them to exist. And in doing so, it feels like I'm giving them justification to be a human being. And that just feels odd to me.
Cassandra, that's heavy. That's heavy. That's heavy. So thank you for sharing that with us. And that's difficult. Again, another hard part of talking about race. Another example of why these conversations are so race, the heaviness of it, the burden of having to even have the conversations, right? And I think about the trauma that comes with that burden. Val, I see your hand up, Val.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How are you?
Good. So the prompt that I would like to respond to is the beneficial part about talking about race and racism. And in our family, that's always been something that's pretty easy to talk about. My daughter is now at that age in middle school where she watches a lot of TikTok and a lot of YouTube. And so I don't mean to say that they radicalize kids, but there's a lot of content there that sometimes she'll make statements where I feel like we just need to have a conversation and kind of bring her back to maybe being a little more moderate and accepting in her opinions and views. And I think no matter who you are, there's something out there on the internet, whether it's, just general internet videos, that you can receive these ideas that maybe had never occurred to you. And we don't know what our kids are being exposed to. So I like being able to check in with her and just, really have conversations about things that she thinks she understood just fine, but maybe she didn't understand just fine. So I think that's valuable for us.
Excellent, Val. And it is valuable because as we're going to introduce today, if you didn't know this, our kids are having these conversations. They're having these conversations. And oftentimes they're having them without us, right? So they're left to their own devices, their own knowledge, their own wisdom or lack thereof, their own experiences, which are often limited, although they do have experiences, but they don't have the experiences that we have. And so the beneficial part of, as Val so eloquently and beautifully shared with us, is that we're able to provide a context for some of the kind of things that they're already talking about, and some clarity, and often some guidance, right? And going back to Raquel shared with us, and even making sure that we have our terminology correct. When we're saying something that it is what we're saying that it is. And it's not just based off of our limited understanding of it. Yeah, so Val, thank you for that. Okay, I want to invite someone who is, if you are a person who identifies as white, I would like to get your voice in the room as well. You identify as white? Raise your hand and unmute yourself. I see Deborah Morales. Deborah, you had your hand up. Did you want to share?
Hi, thank you for letting me share.
You're welcome, Deborah. Thank you for raising your hand.
I am white. My husband is not. And my experience has been bewilderment because my experiences growing up did not include the talk, but my experiences with my children do include the talk. And I struggle to know how to talk, how to be supportive, how to be inclusive, and how to identify myself in this context. So I really appreciate this forum to be able to learn more about this. Thank you.
Deborah, thank you. And Deborah, thank you for giving voice to what is needed for parents, right, in our community. And Royal Oak is committed to doing this work and committed to engaging parents and families in this work via this experience tonight, in addition to all the other wonderful topics that you all will cover with your parent university. But thank you just for naming, Deborah, what is necessary and what's needed for us to support us as parents and having these conversations. All righty. So once, we're not going to do that. Once we assess how comfortable we are, and I think that's an important place to, for some of us, you may need to spend a little bit more time there reflecting on how comfortable you are in having these conversations. The remainder of our time together, I'm going to break this presentation down into 2 steps. And the first step is what parents should know. And these are, it's not, there is a chronology to it to a certain degree, but it's not an ending chronology, if you will. It's something that would be very fluid. But the first thing is to think about what parents should know when wanting to have or engage in conversations about race and racism with your own children. So a couple of things first to know: the facts about race and the difference between race and racism. What is race? What is racism? What is personal racism, interpersonal racism, institutionalized, systemic, structural racism? So we need to know the language. In your agenda, I put something called a glossary of racial equity terms that you can use that, and that will help with developing some common language, but also understanding the difference between some of the terms and terminology that we use in having these conversations. But we should know the facts. There's another document that you have. It's called 10 Things Everybody Should Know About Race. That comes from a documentary called Race, the Power of an Illusion. It's a 2-hour documentary that really talks about what race is and what it is not. It's deep, it's heavy. It's 2 hours long, but I encourage you to check it out. I don't have that linked in your agenda, but it's called Race, the Power of an Illusion. But that document, 10 Things Everyone Should Know About Race, it just gives 10 facts about what race is, right? And so when we're engaging with these conversations with our own children, it provides a context for us, right? Another thing that we should be aware of, the history behind race, racism, and other forms of oppression in this country, right? This is not new. These are not new conversations. And racism preceded race, right? Racism preceded race. And I'm going to show a video in a moment that's going to give a little bit of context of the history of race, defining race, and debunking the myth of what some folks think race is, right? But we have to know that there's a history here in this country that happened long before we arrived, our parents arrived, our grandparents arrived, and our great-grandparents arrived. And so, and that provides a context for what we're seeing today, not just as it relates to individual personal racism, but how it functions at the systemic, structural, and institutional levels, which is really what, when we're talking about racism, we have to talk about. We're not just talking about individual biases or bigotry, right? We're talking about something that is supported by systems. And in order to understand that, you have to understand, to understand how it functions within a system or an institution, you have to understand the history of this country and the history of racial oppression in this country. So race, these are two definitions that I will share with you that was given to, that I use from Trumbull and Pacheco. These are researchers and scholars out of Brown University. They define race and racism these ways. Race as a socially constructed category of people grouped on the basis of physical characteristics, including skin color, hair, facial features. Color terms such as red, yellow, white, and black have historically been used to denote racial groups. What's interesting here, family, is that we don't use color terms like red and yellow anymore to describe people racially. That's considered racist, racially offensive, culturally insensitive, right? But we still very, very much function in the binary of black and white. I don't know about you, but that's interesting to me, right? Certain racial color terms are considered racist, yet we still use white and black, right? And so that's just interesting to me. Racism, however, and so when they said that race is a social construct, right? Would someone like to unmute yourself or put in the chat, what does that mean that is a social construct? You can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat. What does that mean? It is socially constructed.
Jay, I'd like to share about that. We always start our conversations with that as long as I can remember that race is an artificial construct. Race isn't real. It's real in that we respond to it because we've been taught it and our society is organized that way, but there's no science behind it. There is absolutely no science behind race, none.
Amen, Val, thank you. And Kate, thank you for what you put in the chat as well. Good job, Val, thank you. Race is a social construct. It's not real. It was created by man. It was created by human beings. And was created by human beings to justify and defend the behaviors of certain human beings. And I'm going to show a video in a moment. And I'll give two examples of the justification and defending of certain behaviors, right? Race was created to create, was constructed to create a racial hierarchy, right? And if there's a racial hierarchy, that means one race is more valuable, more important, more superior and supreme than another, right? And so if that being said, then if there's a higher race, that means that we can treat you in any ways that we decide to treat you because you are less than, right? And so it was used to justify the enslavement of Africans, legal enslavement in this country for over 250 years, right? And then we see the manifestation of that plan, but that's the legal ownership of another human being and their family. And all that comes with that, the violence, the raping and the murdering, the demaming and dehumanizing that comes with that. It was also used to justify the genocide of our indigenous brothers and sisters, our native people, the original people of this land, whose land we're all occupying right now, right? And it was used to justify the genocide, the murder, the raping and robbing of their culture, their women, their children, putting them off onto reservations on their own land. But again, if we don't see you as fully human, and if we see one group higher, superior than another group, then we can see you as uncivilized. And what we're doing, right, is creating conditions right, to make folks civil, right, based on a racial hierarchy that was created. So as Val indicated, race is not real. There's no science behind it, no biology behind it. None of us who consider ourselves human beings have what's called a race gene or chromosome in our genes at all. However, racism, which is the socialization of race, is very real. And that is the belief, start there, that one racial or ethnic group is superior to another. When a dominant group asserts its power and acts on this belief, it results as a system of advantage based on race. So here's a couple of key things I want to tease out from this definition. And that last part in quotes comes from Dr. Beverly Tatum, right? So first it operates from it's a belief. It's a belief. So it's not an identity, it's a belief, right? That one racial or ethnic group is superior. When a dominant group asserts its power and acts on this belief. So in order to enact racism, a person has to have membership where? In the dominant group, right? Why? As a result, it results in a system of advantage, right? And that's when we talk about systemic, structural, institutionalized racism. So then we get into this conversation, can people of color enact racism? No, we cannot. Why? Because the group that we are members of have no political, economic, social, or historical power. So J. Marx as an individual, can I have racist beliefs? Absolutely. Can I be racially bigoted? Absolutely. Racially prejudiced? Absolutely. It would make me an ugly human being, but my racist ideologies will have no impact on people who are white at all. It is not backed by a system, right? However, if you're white, your individualized racial biases is certainly backed by a system that has provided advantages for white people in this country since the inception, right? And so that's what we have to be. So when people talk about racism and they talk about reverse racism, that's not a thing. That's not possible in the current context, because racism of itself is not just talking about individual acts and behaviors. It's systemic, it's structural, it's institutional. Good. Bridget, is it Bridget? Bridget raised her hand. Yes, Bridget.
Yeah, so I have a question about what you just said.
Please.
I'm a white woman. I'm raising, you can hear them in the background, 3 young white sons. And my question is really that there's judgment on us just because we're white. When as a Christian family, I mean, not everybody's a Christian, I understand that, but as a family, as a unit, we believe that we're all created equal. We're all humans, but I feel like we're lumped together with this ideology that white people are inherently racist, when I know for my family and myself and my children, it's not true. And so I guess my question is, how do you handle situations like that where we're called out or grouped together rather than, just individualized and just having a conversation?
Well, again, if you look at that definition, it's based off of belief, right, Bridget? It's based off of a belief, not an identity, a belief, right? And so that's one place we want to start, but also beginning to think about, because of one's membership in a dominant group, how might they benefit from that, right? Like, for example, I'm a man, and as a result, I know I have male privilege. Now, do I use my male privilege to oppress women intentionally? I hope not, but I know I benefit from it. So if I'm not doing anything against it, am I supporting it and being complicit in it, right? As an individual, J. Marx is not doing anything to enact sexism or treat any women with sexism or marginalize or oppress women, but because of my membership in this group, right? It allows me to benefit from it. So I have to make a choice to do something about that. And I didn't ask for it, right? Just like you didn't ask for what's coming your way. So I think that, to your point, Bridget, I think clarifying terms and really knowing the difference between what racism is and what a racist is may help you in those conversations. But I would say this finally, Bridget, and I just put this in a room, because I don't get into calling folk racist, who's racist. That's not my job. That's for people to do on their own, right? I gotta look at the stuff that's inside of me. But what I do put in the room, Bridget, and for anyone to consider, this country is highly racialized. We've all been racially socialized in this country. As a result of it, we have to ask ourselves, how have we escaped the forces of racism based off of the racial socialization that we've all experienced? And that's a question for all of us. I invite us all to ask ourselves, how have I, Jay Marks, escaped the forces of racism, knowing that I've been socialized in a highly racialized society, right? That invented this social construct to divide and separate people. So Dr. Robin DiAngelo, the author of White Fragility, she says the questions we should be asking ourselves is not, am I racist? She says that's a very passive and antiquated question, because we could easily say, no, I'm not, right? She says the question we should be asking ourselves is, how have our lives, views, values, and ideologies been shaped by the forces of racism? Knowing that racism is operating all around us, not just at the individual level, but at the institutional level as well, okay? And I'm gonna take more questions at the end, okay? I don't wanna make sure I don't, so thank you, Bridget, for asking that. And I saw another question, I think it was Alicia. So Alicia, please hold on to that question, okay? I'll get to it at the end. So I'm gonna show this video now. And it's called The Myth of Race Debunked in 3 minutes. Yep, they're gonna debunk this myth that's been with us for over 500 years in 3 whole minutes. How are they gonna do that? They're gonna talk real fast. That's how they're gonna do it. All right, check it out. The Myth of Race, and you have this linked into your agenda.
You may think you know exactly what race you are, but how would you prove it if someone disagreed with you? The fact is, even though race drives a lot of social and political outcomes, race isn't real. One of the first people to attempt to categorize humans according to race was a German scientist around 1776. He came up with 5 different groups according to physical appearance and geographic origin of their ancestors. Americans of European descent eagerly bought into this type of thinking around the same time. Some historians have said the idea that there were different races helped them resolve the contradiction between a natural right to freedom and the fact of slavery. If whites were their own distinct category, then they could feel a lot better about denying freedom to people who they labeled Black and decided were fundamentally different. But as political priorities change, definitions of race in America adjust right along with them. For example, if you were of Mexican birth or ancestry in the United States in 1929, you were considered white. Then the 1930 census changed that to non-white to limit immigration. Later, when the US needed to increase its labor force during World War II, these people were switched back to white. And what it took to be Black once varied so wildly throughout the country, from 1/4 to 1/16 to the infamous 1 drop of African ancestry, that people could actually change races just by crossing state lines. Then suddenly in 2000, the government decided that Americans could be more than one race and added a multiracial category to the census. This has left many Americans scratching their heads when it comes to selecting who they are. As many as 6.2% of census respondents selected some other race in a 2010 survey. The idea that someone might look one way and identify another way, or that they might be really hard to place in a racial category, is not new. This is why there was a public debate about whether MSNBC's Karen Finney could say she was Black, or how we can't even agree on the racial label assigned to the President of the United States. Of course, many people feel their racial identity is very clear and very permanent, but the fact that some people have changed theirs and that no one can really argue with them shows how shaky the very idea of race is. This is all because there isn't a race chromosome in our DNA that people can point to. It simply doesn't exist. When the medical community links race to health outcomes, it's really just using race as a substitute for other factors, such as where your ancestors came from, or the experiences of people who may have been put in the same racial group as you. Dorothy Roberts explains that sickle cell anemia is a prime example of this. The disease is linked to areas with high rates of malaria, which include some parts of Europe and Asia in addition to Africa, It's not actually about race at all. This, of course, does not mean that the concept of race isn't hugely important in our lives. The racial categories to which we're assigned can determine real-life experiences, they can drive political outcomes, and they can even make the difference between life and death. But understanding that racial categories are made up can give us an important perspective on where racism came from in the first place.
All right, family, I'm gonna ask you to go to the chat. What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? And when I mean what did you take away from the video?
You may
Put your thoughts in the video. Put your thoughts regarding the video. What did you see or hear? What are your thoughts about what you heard? What does it make you wonder? Again, that was debunking a 500-year myth in 3 minutes. That was a lot. And you have it in your agenda, so you can watch it over and over again. I encourage you to watch it with your children. Excellent, Alicia. The subjectiveness of race, the subjectivity rather, of race and what we call race. Another, Lisa, good. Excellent reflection. Yes, Ryan. Oh, race has been used for political gain. It's called, Evan, the title of the video is called The Myth of Race Debunked in 3 Minutes, but it's linked into your agenda. Evan, I'm gonna put the agenda in the chat again, just so you have it, okay? So you all can watch it again, share it, talk about it. Right. Oh, you're welcome. I got you, Marcella. How's Marcella? Hey, Marcella. Yeah. Good thoughts. Yeah. And yeah, talking about the privilege of not even have to thinking about what box to check, or even being offended about having to check a box in the first place. Right? And one of the things hopefully you took away from this, and then I'm going to get into some more of the presentation, is one, how complex the whole notion of race is. And like the video said, it's shaky because it's on shaky ground. Like Val shared with us earlier, it's not real. And you know it's not real, but just by looking at how it's being used for political gain, how complex it is, right? Because what you see is not always what you get. When you talk about racial identities of people, right? And so I hope that you walk away knowing that one, race is a social construct, it was created. Two, so it's not real in that context. However, racism is real, because some folk get into that notion, well, race ain't real, racism ain't real. No. And some people say, well, maybe we should stop using racial terms. Maybe we'll get there. But will that change how we look at each other? Will that change how we treat each other? Will that change the ideologies we hold? Because remember, racism is a belief. It's not an identity, it's a belief. So will that change our belief systems about each other? Right? And I don't know. A couple of other things parents should know. Parents should know what prejudices, biases, stereotypes, dispositions they possess about people who are different than them. Right? I put another link to another resource for you in your agenda. It's called the Implicit Association Test, the IAT. If you have not taken that, it's a scientific test developed by scientists and researchers from Harvard, I think University of Virginia and University of Washington. And it is helpful in that it helps a person to identify biases that they may have as it relates to certain identity groups. I encourage you to take it, right? One of the things that we know for certain now, and I'm not a neurologist, but neurology backs me up here, is that we all have biases. Our brains are wired to categorize people based on stereotypes we've formed about them, right? And so the question is not, do I have biases? The questions we should be asking ourselves are, what are my biases? So that I can find out what they are, so that I can counteract them before they manifest themselves into words and behaviors that we call microaggressions. Parents should also know where they are on their own racial identity development, your own consciousness and level of awareness and acceptance relative to racial diversity, meaning your beliefs and attitudes about race and racism. What are your attitudes about it, right? One of the things we know about race and racism, about racism particularly, oftentimes that operates on a very unconscious level. And so if we're not willing to ask ourselves, one, how might we be perpetuating racism, right? And that could be whether we're, have some unconscious prejudice about race, right? Racial biases, or whether we're just complicit. So sometimes people call us out on things that we're not aware of in ourselves, but they see it, feel it, and hear it. And that's why we have to do our own work first. So before you start talking to your children about race and racism, we have to look in the mirror. I believe that all equity work starts with the person in the mirror. So these conversations don't start with your children, family. They start with you looking in the mirror, thinking about your own experiences, thinking about your own values, thinking about how you see race, thinking about times you may have perpetuated or targeted someone or been an agent of racism yourself, or have been targeted by the forces of racism yourself, right? Another resource that I put in there for you is called racial identity development. These are theories that will help you to think about your own racial consciousness and awareness, okay? And the theory I think I left you was from Dr. Beverly Tatum. There are tons of these theories, but the one I think I left you was from Dr. Beverly Tatum, where she has two groups, people of color and those who identify as white. And what she really just helps you, and what I ask people to do is to read these stages based on an identity that you, or the racial identity that you relate to, and see if you can find your life and your life experiences in those stages. But by developing that consciousness, that's going to help you to have a heightened awareness about your own racial experiences, your own racial history, but also about racism. Okay. So I'm going to break this down to you, then I'm going to say a few more things, and I'm going to get us to a Q&A, okay, in a little bit. This right here, I think will be helpful. And you may not be able to see it. If not, you can click on the link in your agenda that says they're never too young to talk about race, and you have your own copy of this. I'm going to start to your left. At birth, babies look equal, and this is research, right? The researchers are there, so you can go and do your own work. I'm not asking you to listen to or trust J. Marks. I'm one voice. Do your own work, okay? At birth, babies look equally at faces of all races, but at 3 months old, babies prefer to look at the faces of their own race. By 3 months old, now at 3 months old, they don't know what race or racism is. They can't even talk yet, right? But they prefer to look at faces of their own race. I'm at number 1 now. Children as young as 2 years old use race to reason about people's behaviors. They're using the color of people's skin to rationalize about folks' behavior, right? Number 2, by 30 months, most children use race to choose playmates when that's an option. And that's called affinity grouping. And that's normal, right? That's okay. People gravitate towards people who they feel look like them, pray like them, love like them, speak like them, have similar experiences, similar beliefs and ideologies. That's affinity grouping. That's a normal, natural process, right? But children of color don't always have that option to choose playmates with people who look like them, depending on their environment. Number 3, expressions of racial prejudice often peak at ages 4 and 5. Now, this is before they even get into school. They're right around preschool area, right? I mean, they're right around pre-K, but they're peaking at 4 and 5. So before they even got to school yet. So that's what we have to think about what's happening in our household, right? And Bridget, you gave a wonderful example when you talked about your little ones that you're raising, right? Paying attention to what we're saying, what we're talking about, but also what we're not talking about. right? Because we're modeling for our children, right? Because before they even get to school, they've had rich experiences of a 4 or 5-year-old. Because they've probably been to sports, maybe, dance, gymnastics, right? Kumon and these other rich extracurricular activities, right? But they're also in your household, seeing and hearing things, right? Number 4, by 5, Black and Hispanic children in research settings show that children show no preference toward their own groups compared to whites. White children at this age remain strongly biased in favor of whiteness. Now that's at 5 years old. Black and Hispanic children are showing biases towards whiteness. And it's not really surprising when you think about socialization in this country. And then you also think about what a 5-year-old, what they're interested in. Superheroes often, princesses often, right? And you have to ask, and we're getting better, but we have to ask ourselves, what are the racial identities of the cartoons that they watch, the television programs they watch, regardless of your racial identity, right? And oftentimes your religious identity. Many children love Christmas. Well, why do they love Christmas? Santa Claus. Well, what color is Santa Claus in mainstream media? We know that Santa Claus in communities of color is the racial identity of that community, but not when you watch Santa Claus is Coming to Town on TV. Not when you watch Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. Not in a lot of postcards and holiday cards that we use, magazines and books, right? Even Jesus Christ, right? For those who practice Christianity, has been perpetuated in the image of a white man. Pale skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. And we know that's historically inaccurate. That's not true. The people who lived in that region during that time were people of color. Now, I'm not saying I look like Jesus, but he probably looked more like me than that painting of that Michelangelo put before the world. Because Michelangelo painted a picture of a pale-faced individual with blonde hair and blue eyes and called him Jesus. And we bought it. But it's no surprise that children at 5 years old, right, who identify as Black and Hispanic, may prefer whiteness because of how they're socialized and what they're seeing in mainstream society, okay? In particular, if they're going to school where they're racially isolated. It's another factor. By kindergarten, children show many of the same racial attitudes that adults in our culture hold. They have already learned to associate some groups with higher status than others. That's racism. Remember, that's that belief in one group higher than another group. And this is by kindergarten. The good news is, family, which is why we're here tonight, number 6+, explicit conversations with 5 to 7-year-olds about interracial friendship can dramatically improve their racial attitudes in as little as a single week. Family, parents, beloved, if we just start talking and having regular conversations with our children about race. Race is a human variation, although we know it's socially constructed. It's a human variation. It's a difference. It's a difference. But I wanted to point out something here. In the middle of the text on this document, it says silence about racism, race reinforces racism. It reinforces it by not talking about it, by not naming it. If you want to do some more learning on your own, which I encourage you to do, there's some more resources at the bottom right of this document. So why is it important that parents know a little bit more? According to Dr. King, nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. And I'm not calling anyone ignorant or stupid. Dr. King did, no, I'm just joking. But what he's saying is there's no excuses for us to be excessively ignorant, intentionally ignorant, right? We will always be ignorant about some things because none of us are all knowing. But there's no excuses. There's no excuses to be ignorant about some of the things that we're ignorant about, right? And to be consciously ignorant about certain things because it's not our experience. All right, lastly, I'm gonna finish up here. What can parents do? I'm gonna define two terms: anti-racism, an active and consistent process of change to eliminate individual, institutional, and systemic racism, right? And the key word, active and consistent, right? And we need parents engaging, regardless of your racial identity, engaging in anti-racism work. And anti-racist, according to Dr. Ibram X. Kendi, the author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, is someone who is supporting anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing anti-racist ideas. This includes the expressions or ideas that racial groups are equals and none needs developing, and is supporting policy that reduces racial inequity. So what he's suggesting to us is that right there, he's letting us know, again, someone who's supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions and their ideologies. Because remember, racism is based off of a belief system. So we're fighting these beliefs and policies, and we're fighting these racist ideologies actively. But he also goes on to say that racial groups are equals and none needs developing. So Black and brown children, indigenous children, don't need to be further developed. That's a racist ideology to think that they do. They just need the eradication of racism. That's what they need. They need the eradication of racial oppression, right? That's what they need. They don't need community service. They need for us to be anti-racist and to eradicate these forces of racism. So here's some things parents can do. Be aware of what you say and do. Remember, our children see and hear everything. Help your children feel good about themselves and their own cultural identities. This work is not about making one. If you read the racial identity development theories that I share with you, at the highest level of both of them, it talks about affirming people in their racial identities. So regardless if you identify as white, Hispanic, Black, Indigenous, we want people to have pride and feel good about your racial identity. We just don't want people having supremacist ideologies about your racial identity, right? But this is not about making people feel bad about their racial identity. We inherited this mess. We didn't create it. But if you're passive, you could be perpetuating it, right? And that's, for some folks, is where blame, shame, and guilt may come in, right? Acknowledge and respect differences within your own family. Point out human variations with your family. Talk about how grandma and grandpa, if you will, or your grandparents are older, different. Some of our family members are taller and shorter, different body types, right? Even within the same racial group, we have different hues and color of skin, colorism, right? And so making sure that our children aren't growing up with biases around colorism, but that we have differences as it relates to that, right? And point those things out. Point those things out, the way that people dress, our language, all those things. What else we have? Provide opportunities for your children to play and interact with people who are different from them, right? So if your school is not racially diverse, there are communities that you can go to where you can get your child engaged in sports or other extracurricular activities, where your child is experiencing the racial diversity of the world, right? And I mean the racial diversity of the world. We're becoming more racially diverse by the day in this country, right? And we'll be more racially diverse tomorrow than we were today. But sometimes we have to step outside of our communities to give our children those experiences, right? Another thing I share with parents, take your children on field trips outside of your community. Meaning, if Saturday is a day that you go to the grocery store and you go on family outings and you go to the park, or y'all go for walks, or you go shopping, or you go for lunch and dinner, once a month, do those things in a community where the people don't look like you. Intentionally go to a community where the people don't look like you. And now you're normalizing racial diversity. Because as your kids grow up and they're like, regardless of the racial identity of your children, particularly if they're white and you're growing up in a racially homogenous community where the majority of people are white, it becomes normal for your white children to be around children of color, playing with children of color at the park, seeing other families of color going for walks and shopping and doing the same things that you do. We normalize it, right? So go on a field trip once a month where you're doing the things that you do every Saturday or Sunday in the community where the people don't look like you. What else can we do? Select books, toys, music, art, movies, and videos that represent non-stereotypical views of racial groups. Look around your house, people. What's on the walls? There are people on the walls that aren't your family members. What is the racial identity of those people? What a wonderful way to include racial diversity in your home just via art that we hang up on a wall. Who comes to your house to visit? Do they all look like you? Or do you have friends and family members that represent diverse racial groups? What kind of books and magazines do you have laying around? And what are the images on those magazines and books? Right? A bunch of y'all are gonna run out to Target as soon as we hang up from the Zoom and get you all Ebony magazine, aren't you? You should. Go out and get you some magazines and put them in your home. So one, you and your children can read about the life experiences of people who don't look like you. But also you have these valuable books around and these magazines just around your home. You're bringing racial diversity in your home. Your family is beautiful. Your family, Erica said, we're going to Target anyway. I know that's right, Erica. But your families are beautiful. But if your family is racially homogenous, then we could bring diversity into the home, okay? Couple of more things. Talk openly with your children about issues of race and racial diversity, such as unfair bias, stereotype. When you're watching something on television, you're watching a commercial or something, and you see something, point it out and talk to your children, right? And you talk about these individual acts that you see, right? Answer their questions honestly and simply. They're children. You don't have to give them a lecture on race and racism, right? Children tend to have simple questions. Give them simple answers, okay? Don't overreact. Ask your children questions when they make statements, right? That may be racially charged, racially sensitive, racially biased, right? Take advantage of those teachable moments. Provide facts. Older children are comforted by facts. They want to know the real. For those of you who are raising teenagers, they already know the real before they ask you. So give them the real. Honor your children's fears. Don't dismiss their fears. If they're afraid of another human being because of the color of their skin, address that and address it now. Otherwise, they'll grow up to be adults afraid of people because of the color of their skin. Don't be a bystander to racial, cultural sensitivity, right? Bias, discrimination, or hate. Take a stand, do and or say something every time, because your children are watching. If you find that you have privilege based on your racial identity, model for your children how you can use your privilege to be an ally or a co-conspirator to a marginalized group. That is what we call an anti-racist, right? Model for your children anti-racist behavior, right? Incorporate that type of leadership in your home so that your children don't see you being passive. Because here's the thing. If there's a racist act going on or your children are seeing it and they see you say nothing, do nothing, they're looking at you. And they're thinking to themselves, Mom and Dad saw that. My parents saw that. Grandma, Grandpa saw that, and they said nothing. Are they complicit? Do they agree? Are they conforming to that? Right? The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. If we call ourselves the good people, how are we being silent when other people are being oppressed racially because of the color of their skin? When people are being targeted by the forces of racism because of the color of their skin? And can we really call ourselves good people when we sit idly by and watch this happen? So it's 7:20. I'm going to take some questions and then I'll show this video at the end. What questions do you have? I'll do the best I can. I don't have all the answers for sure. I'm a human being like you are, struggling. Alicia, please. Thank you, Alicia, for coming back to us too with that question. I know you raised it earlier, so thank you.
Yeah, so it's actually a different question from before, but it was based on one of the points you had for what parents can do. And this is something I kind of struggle with myself is I would love to expose my children, to white boys, to more culture and diversity and everything. But I have this inherent guilt that I'm tokenizing that race or that culture by doing that. So I guess I don't know what the line is or what the boundary is between experiencing that culture in a respectful way and or tokenizing it and almost using it as a benefit or as a teaching opportunity. It just feels wrong sometimes.
Well, if you feel like you're tokenizing it, right, then maybe that's something to wrestle with. But I think, Alicia, if you have a genuine, authentic concern about your, I mean, folks can live where they live, right? And you can't control the demographics of that community. You can control where you move, right? But if you want to provide your children with different experiences, we have to provide them with different experiences. If we want to provide them with different frameworks, we have to put them in a place where they could develop different frameworks, right? And we could do that through schooling sometime, but we could do that through other things like sporting activities, right? Where you're giving them an opportunity authentically. You're not forcing any relationship. You're putting them in an environment where they can form relationships on their own, right? And I'm glad you asked that, Alicia, because one could think about, am I tokenizing? Am I appropriating? Right? What am I doing here? And only you know the intent behind what you're doing. But if you know that you're authentically trying to create space for your children to grow up in a place where they are, because what the whole goal for me, Alicia, is that we're normalizing race. We're normalizing, where it's not even, right? It's just it's what Roberto Chenet calls a difference as difference. It's just a difference, right? And it's a difference that we acknowledge, that we notice, that we should affirm in people and value and appreciate, but it's a difference and it's normal. And how do we do that? To me, we incorporate it in their normal lives, in their day-to-day lives, right? Now, what could be tokenizing is if you go to museums and periodically read books, but you don't have any lived experiences. You can give your children and yourself lived experiences, right? Knowing that you're trying to give them, provide for them, because what this will help, I know what will help you, Alicia. Look at those racial identity development theories. When you look at those theories, you may find your own experiences, and then you will think about the experiences you want for your sons. And how do you give them those experiences? Some of that is the opportunities you provide them with. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking. Thank you for coming back, Alicia, with your questions. Is there another question?
Hi, Dr. Marks. It's Lisa Haynes. I have a question.
What's up, Lisa Haynes?
Hi. So I've been battling with something for a very long time. When people look at me, they see white, but that's not what I am. I'm Arab. That's where my family comes from. Half my family is Arab and the other half is Mediterranean. So, and I have found that throughout my life, because I've been in leadership positions, I'm in healthcare, that because I've had to give out discipline or because I've had to ask questions or inquire, that sometimes when I've done that to a person of color, I've had it come back at me, well, you're just doing that because you're racist, because you're white. And I'm just like, grr. And it really, and I go, well, first of all, I'm not white. And second of all, I'm asking you a question I would ask anyone else. But I still get it. I've had someone call me suspect because I had a question about the way things were done. Yeah. I've had neighbors talk about other cultures and the ones that I belong to, and then I go and they think because they're comfortable with it, and then when I say something and they're like, oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. It's how do you battle that? How do you not lose your mind and sometimes not want to get sassy?
Well,
Well, I already am sassy.
no, you're good, Lisa, because not being sassy, right, is challenging. But we know that tends not to be as helpful, get us towards our goals. So we have to ask ourselves, what are our goals in these conversations? And I know that it sounds like you present as white, but you're not white. And so people see you as white because of how you look, right? Their interpretation of you. This is another example of why race is not real and it's so complex. One of the things I would share with you, Lisa, and for our colleagues who identify as white, if someone accuses you of being racist, step back and ask for feedback. Because one of the things we know about racism, again, it operates on a very unconscious level. And sometimes some of the things that we do or say, one, could be operating from an ideology of racism, unbeknownst to us. Also, people have had experiences.
Absolutely.
With people. And so a part of that is they may bring in those experiences into their conversations with you. So what I ask people to do is ask for feedback. Jay, you said that what I said was racist. Tell me more. What about what I said was racist to you? Give me some feedback on that. And then give them an opportunity to share with you, Lisa, what they felt was racist and provide a context for that. I find that asking questions can be helpful to me. And this is you asking for feedback. Now, you have to be ready for that feedback.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you have to be ready for that feedback. That's what I would do. And that way, you're giving them an opportunity to say, name some things, because you could be doing or saying something that another colleague or other colleagues throughout their life, other people throughout their lives had done and said, who were white and who have been doing those things from a racist perspective, right? But I think asking them that question could be helpful, but you have to be ready for the feedback and ready to engage in the conversation. Once you get that feedback though, then I think that's when you can go in and you can talk more about your racial identity, but also knowing that, your racial identity of itself may not relieve you of saying something that was racist, right? We have to be clear about that too. So, but I think that asking that question, giving them an opportunity to, elaborate on or go deeper with what they're saying, and then you having that conversation may be helpful.
Thank you. No, and I get it. Everyone has past traumas, right? That impact who we are, what we say. Believe me, when 9/11 happened, our family was scared. And I had people call me awful things. And I felt it. And so when I have the few times when someone has called me a racist, especially when I was in a leadership role, and I have done what you've said a few times. I said, I've been, whoa, wait. What did I say that was racist? And I remember, I'll never forget, one gal said, well, it's not what you said, it's just who you are. You're only asking me this, or you're picking on me because you are. And I was like, but honestly, that's not, I'm just asking you like I ask everyone else when I'm doing evaluations or whatnot. It's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I wish my skin was darker. I wish I looked more like what people think, because then maybe I wouldn't get that other side, because I hate the other part of it. When people think it's okay to say what they say. And I go, I'm Arabic. You should really be careful like what you're saying.
Right.
Like, oh,
you don't deserve the trauma and being targeted like you've been targeted either, Lisa.
Yeah, no one deserves it. It's awful.
But I do think that it's important that we ask for that feedback, that we check ourselves when we're getting that feedback and allow ourselves to be a listener to the person who's accusing us of holding these beliefs. Because again, that's what they're accusing of, holding these beliefs, right? And then begin to have a conversation.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Welcome. All right, it's 7:30, y'all. Now I could stay on afterward, but I gotta show you this video. I would stay on afterward, Dr. Kim, if it's okay to answer any more questions for folks, but I gotta show this video to get you all out of here.
Okay, can I say one thing before you show it? Because I know it's great.
Go right ahead.
I just want to do a quick thank you to everyone who stayed and engaged in this conversation today. This was very, Jay, you outdid yourself this time. And I say that every time you do something. This was phenomenal. I learned a lot, even though this is also my work. And everyone who's on this call today will receive a evaluation that asks you about this session and also topics of interest that you might want to see us cover in the future. So that's all my little housekeeping, and let's watch this phenomenal video and go out on a positive note.
Thank you, Dr. Kim, and thank you for inviting me to be in community with you. Mary Beth, I see Mary Beth is with us. Good to see you, Mary Beth. It's been a minute. And the Rochester leadership team as well as staff, and really most importantly this evening, parents. Thank you. Let's watch this video. It's called Love Has No Labels. And I showed this video because really what it does for me, it shows us the power of love. It shows the power of love. And I include this quote by Dr. King, who says, darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. Let's check out this video about love. And it's short, it's only 3 minutes.
And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. And I can't change, even if I tried, even if I wanted to. My love, my love, my love, she keeps me warm. She keeps me warm. She keeps me warm.
My heart doesn't see race. Love has no age limit.
We are neighbors and best friends.
We all have different religions, but we have universal love as well.
I love my sister.
Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Family, that's what's possible. Pamela, I see that beautiful little baby over there that you shared with us. Adorable. But family, in the end, there she is. Hello. In the end, in the end, right? And this video was not about loving each other in spite of our identities or in spite of our labels. It's really about loving each other with our labels as a result of, right? Because of, right? Being more inclusive as opposed to dismissing or ignoring them. But that I can love you for your labels, right? And we can love each other for our labels. So my final thought as I say goodbye to you, a father, this whole conversation reminds me of this. A father says to his son, son, be careful where you walk. The son replies, Dad, you're the one who needs to be careful. Remember, I'm following in your footsteps. Parents, our children are watching. They see everything, and they're hearing, and they hear everything. What are we showing them when they see us? What are they listening to? What are they when they hear us? Check out the handouts and the resources that I have for you. There's some recommended readings for you that's also in your agenda. I will stay on to answer any questions. And I want to say Asante Sana to you. Asante Sana Swahili. It means thank you very much. Again, thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you, Mary Beth. And thank you, Rochester Schools Community, Rochester, Royal Oak, I'm sorry. Thank you, Royal Oak School.
Hey.
Man, don't do us like that, good brother.
I was in
Rochester. Don't do us that bad.
No, they're good people there. I was in Rochester last week, so good, all good people. But I want to thank my Royal Oak family and Royal Oak community for having me, and allowing me to facilitate your learning this evening, and allowing me to learn with you and from you as you share. I selfishly get an opportunity to learn myself, and I'm always after that. So thank you all for having me. I wish you and your families peace, blessings, good health, and safety. Take good care of yourselves. Royal Oak. There you go, Brother Melvin.
Exactly.
We'll stay here a couple of
minutes.
You're welcome, brother.
We'll stay on a couple of minutes for those of you who want to hang around. Not a problem. Dr. Marks is very generous to do that. But for those of you who have to go, we know you have to go. We thank you so much for engaging and just being honest and open and willing to share and participate. So thank you.
So I came in kind of late on this.
Okay, no worries.
So I missed quite a few things on here, but I really wanted to be here because I'm a brother, and I have a son that attends Royal Oak, that's been in Royal Oak for the middle school and the high school, and it's just like I had to have my first racial talk with him in middle school while he was in the 8th grade, because he had got suspended because he's friends with everybody. He feels he's friends with everybody, but I had to teach him about not being friends with everybody is considered as being an associate. But a young lady he was taking a test with, he got up and finished the test. So the young lady he always jokes around with, and he got up and just touched her in the forehead like, all right, see you later, big head. And the girl got mad at him and told the principal, which then he got suspended for the incident. And it's just been like, it was like a hard conversation to have with him as far as, racially profiling and things of that nature. So I wanted to get on here to, see how we, hear about other parents and things of that nature and their experience at the school.
Melvin, just so you know, let me interrupt real quick, Melvin, just so you know, it has been recorded. I'm going to turn it off now. Jay, can you make me the host again so I can turn it off so people can have an honest conversation? But this will be posted on our website so you can see what you missed. And also in the presentation, Jay will show you how to walk through the link to get to the resource page. So I don't want you to think
Okay.
that you won't be able to get all this information, but I'm gonna shut up now and let Jay talk.
Okay.
No, I just put the agenda, let me see, I'm gonna put the agenda